Well, welcome to January 10th. Today we're going to continue on our 200 drawing prompt book. Today we're up to drawing prompt 158. And the drawing prompt is factory. And in that vein we decided to draw the famous poster of Rosie the Riveter. If you want to see how we did it, stay tuned because that's what we're going to do today. Well, this is our project today. The prompt is factory. And when you think of factories in World War II, you think of Rosie the Riveter. And this is the famous Rosie the Riveter poster. And probably one of the most famous images of World War II, believe it or not. So we're going to try to reproduce this poster, including the "We Can Do It" up across the top and the little thought bubble. So let's get started. We've already got kind of outlined our project here, so I can get it all on the page. And let's start doing some drawing here. First thing we're going to work on is this iconic red polka dot head scarf here. I think the deal was that they needed women for war production, but women either thought they couldn't do it, or they thought it wasn't feminine, or whatever the process was. I mean, women were always working, but working in industrial environments was a different thing. And I had to make sure that women understood that, working on the farm, putting in hay, is not any easier than working in an industrial job. So, and then they had to, and that's where gets this in the Rosie the Riveter. She's kind of rolling up her sleeve and showing us her muscle. That's showing the tough side of it. But they also want to show that you could still do all this work. You can not only do this work, but you could still be a woman, whatever that means. So that's where you get the famous, she got the eyebrows going on, eyelashes, the lipstick, makeup. So she's all dolled up, and we can assume here that underneath this bandana, her hair is in the typical 1940s style. So, and here she's making a muscle showing how strong she is, but she has fingernail polish on and so forth. So the message was, you can have it all. You can be a tough factory worker and then go out with all that money you earned and still be feminine. One of the sad, I don't know why this is so sad to me, but when one of my saddest little anecdotes from the World War II was they needed pilots. Back then, women couldn't fly in combat. Since Amelia Earhart, everyone knew that women could fly fine, could pilot fine. But they needed women to fly airplanes from the factory to wherever they're going to be used. Well, they did that, and and they recruited them, and and talked them up, and and these women were highly valuable and highly praised, and and everything else. And they rendered a valuable service. And then I don't think they were officially in the military service. They wore uniforms and everything. I'm not sure of their status, but towards the end of the war, they didn't need them anymore. So they just, no warning, no nothing, no severance pay. They just cut them loose. Well, it helps to be smart, but another thing I discovered in the military is it helps to be ambitious. You gotta want it, as Colin Powell once said. Reason he didn't want to run for president is because he didn't have that fire in his belly, and that as an Army officer, every morning he came in with the idea of doing a great job. He was ambitious. And I don't know, in my own mind, not verbally, but in my own mind, I used to almost criticize, guys. You'd see guys that would always be, always trying to get the limelight and always trying to get the best assignments and the hardest jobs and fighting for promotion and recognition. But when you go through history, military history anyway, the great leaders, they wanted they wanted to lead men in battle. Patton famously, he practically lived for that, Eisenhower almost got court-martialed for complaining about not being sent to World War II or World War I. And nobody was more ambitious than Field Marshal Montgomery. So I don't know, maybe the takeaway is it's probably better to, instead of chasing the money, find out where your passion is and go that way. Because you're much more likely to succeed if you're doing something you're enthused about. And you see, presidents like Bill Clinton, Richard Nixon, Kennedy. Well, all of them. I mean, you gotta want it to be president. I was listening to a tape conversation with John Kennedy. He was at a dinner party. One of his supporters and I don't know who the supporter was, but they had a tape recorder running. This is when he was first starting, thinking about running for president, 1959. His friend there asked him why he wanted to be president. Well, Kennedy didn't even understand the question. It was just totally foreign to him. why why you would even ask such a question. It's a legitimate question. I mean, it's kind of a low-hanging fruit softball question, huh? Just why do you want to be president? Well, I want to do my best for my country. I think I have the experience and the leadership abilities it takes, so forth. It's just kind of a low ball question. But Kennedy didn't even know how to answer it. He finally thought about it a while, and he said, well, he was in public service, and the most impactful thing he thought he could do would be president. I was filling in her exposed skin with some of this light beige. I remember I Googled I remember reading a story about some woman who had fought in the American Civil War. And I thought it was interesting. So I Googled women who fought. I mean, there are a lot of women who suffered in World War II. I mean, in the American Civil War, but I mean actually in combat units. Because of course women weren't allowed to enlist. But most of the recruits, or a lot of the recruits, were pretty young boys. So this woman wanted to fight in the Civil War. The story I read was about a woman who just wanted to be with her husband. So she just dressed up like a man, a boy, and and stayed with her husband. Well, so I Googled women who fought in the American Civil War. Turns out there was quite a few. They would, back then you just enlisted and got with your unit, And I remember this one woman who fairly successful, and then she got shot, and they didn't notice that she was a woman until after she got shot, and they went to treat her and discovered she was a woman. Well, that's dedication right there. Well, the light's coming in that direction. So I'm going to do this light blue. This is our uniform. I'm going to do the light blue for the parts that are getting the light. Now this little symbol on her shirt, I believe it stands for the War Production Department. You know, that one of their jobs was to recruit workers for war production, and they need a lot too. I guess Rosie the Riveter was kind of famous for airplanes, but that wasn't the only thing they were building. They're building tanks, ships, and the whole famous wartime miracle of production. One of the most famous episodes of the Rosie the Riveter stories was in the manufacture of nuclear material for the Manhattan Project. They had these big cyclotrons that you had to separate the 235, the uranium-235, from the 238. The 235 was the one you could make a bomb with, and the 238 was just the isotope that actually, they actually make, it's called depleted uranium. They take that 238 and melt it down into bullets, because, it's a little bit heavier than lead. Not really dangerous. And, but anyway, they had these cyclotrons, and what they did is they just sent out a beam of 238 mixed with 231, because in a natural state, that's just the way it is. It's mixed up, but you got to separate them. Well, what they do is they run it through this cyclotron that would kind of spin it out, because the 238 was heavier. It would it would spin out, and they could collect it. Well, they had these big machines. I mean, this is moonshot scale production facilities. You know, well, the girls would sit at these consoles and kind of adjust the, you know, they didn't know what they were doing because everything was a secret, but all they had to do was keep the dial, you know, in the right range. So they had to sit in front of these panels and tweak those dials to keep the, you know, to keep the flow just right. Well, come to find out, when they tested it, the women were actually better at it than the men. I kind of think of the Manhattan Project, which was the effort to create the nuclear bomb. That it was a bunch of nuclear physicists out in Los Alamos, just sitting around with their slide rules, figuring out the way to do it. But the fact is, it was much, much, much more than that. It was a fact that took a giant industrial base to create the nuclear material to make those bombs. Which is one of the reasons, you know, the Nazis were working on it, but they never succeeded because it was such a took such a huge industrial capacity, you know, to do it. Well, one of the things that helped us too on the Manhattan Project is we had Roosevelt, and it's just amazing that you know they came to him with the proposal for the Manhattan Project, vastly, hugely expensive, massively expensive, and they needed airplanes and ships and guns. And they basically asked Roosevelt for the resources for the Manhattan Project, and it was all theoretical. Nobody even knew if it would work. They didn't even have the material. Plutonium, for example, doesn't even occur naturally in nature, and neither does uranium-235. Has to be it would have to be manufactured. So anyway, they asked Roosevelt for approval to go ahead on it, and he approved it. You know, that's amazing. To me, anyway. Well, that does it for Drawing prompt 158. Today we did our version of the famous World War II Rosie the Riveter poster. One of the most famous pictures of World War II. Okay, let's see what our prompt is for tomorrow. It is inside your refrigerator. Hope to see you then.